How you doing?
We are back, episode 12.
Something.
I'm starting to actually lose count. This is a good sign. This is a good problem to have.
Hopefully.
How are you feeling after our inaugural guest last week? I thought that was a good pod.
I enjoyed it. It was nice to have somebody else around. No offense.
Yeah, none taken.
It was interesting because I felt like I did way less talking, which is either good or bad, depending on
I think it was probably
who you are.
like,
But it's obviously because there's three people.
There's
so
three
you need
people,
to-
yeah.
It was nice. It was a nice change of dynamic. So
but I did listen back to it.
Hmm.
I thought it was pretty well balanced. I thought we covered some interesting territory.
yeah,
It's not at all where I thought it would go. That was kind of cool. Joel's
Yeah,
obviously
same.
a really good speaker, and so it was great.
yeah.
He's been thinking about this from dimensions that we probably haven't spent a whole lot of time on as well. So I think that was really cool.
Yeah.
Just the two of us this week, but we've got some other guests in the queue coming up over the next few weeks. So I think this is going to be a nice little back and forth dynamic, huh?
Yeah. I think
Be
we'll
pretty
do some with two of us, some with guests.
Yeah.
I like it as more of a discussion format than an interview.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not. Yeah, I think it works nice. It's such a wide open space at the moment with so much going on that it's useful to just have, I think, a broad conversation about what's going on and why is it really interesting, and just sort of share that excitement.
Well, a lot of podcasts seem like they're set up for everyone to have their monologues basically. There's a bunch of questions, and then I am obviously calling attention to All In. Again, that's my weekly favorite thing to do, is to just shit on the All In podcast. But yeah, it's everyone wants to get their short monologue out. It's scripted, and then you move on to the next one. And I don't know, it just feels like it's better. Even the All In podcast, when it's actually really good is when they're locked in proper debate.
It's when Jason doesn't turn up.
Doesn't,
that week.
yeah. Yes. But there's actually proper debate going on, and it's they've broken free of the pre-scripted remarks that they probably have set up in front of them.
Yeah.
And it feels a bit more dynamic. But that's kind of not necessarily the edge we're going for either. It's more just free-flowing fireside chats. Obviously, we're sat at the beach in front of a fire right now, so
I think that's what when we are sat back at the beach, that's good. It's a surprisingly nice day. It looked like it was going to be a little bit rainy, but it's come good today. So
Perth
it's been
winter.
a nice morning down here. Although the sea is just nonsense.
Bit rough.
Today. Well, it's just flat. It's super shallow and flat, and then a 5-meter wave every 4 seconds just comes and destroys you. So I didn't really spend a long time in there this morning. I wasn't really feeling in a swimming mood, so I couldn't be bothered to sit out there in the freezing cold water for a long time.
yeah.
So I just played around in the waves for a bit and then came back in. But it's nice.
Not bad for Perth winter though.
Oh yeah,
That's
it's
pretty
a
good.
beautiful day.
Pretty solid.
But all right.
So today,
welcome to the good stuff then.
yes,
There you go.
we're back. I think we wanted to just touch on some, I guess, misconceptions and myths that might exist around AI today. I don't really know where we want to take this. I think you had one that you were thinking about offline, but
the one I suggested we start with, which I think you hear a lot, is I trained the model.
oh yeah,
And
Go
I'm
on,
oh right, cool. You're just putting some money behind this thing. That's good. How big's your GPU fleet and the rest of it. And I always think it's interesting to kind of try and get under the skin of what do people mean when they say I trained the model? What are they actually trying to get out of it? What do they think the model is doing, and why would they retrain a model for something?
yeah,
And because there are reasons to do it. I don't think personally it's not something I'm particularly bothered about at all. But I think what most people mean when they say I trained the model is usually they mean I attached a couple of PDFs. That's often what is under the pin of this.
tailored context.
Somebody's got a chatbot, and the chatbot can do a few different things, and they've said all right, well here's my, sometimes it's a system prompt, and sometimes it's a system prompt plus documents that are in a knowledge store, and sometimes it's just documents in a knowledge store. And the idea is now I can talk to it about my business, or I can talk to it and tell it to be me, or something like that.
I almost feel like it's more about what it doesn't say than what it does, because you are putting guardrails on what it's allowed to talk about. If you've got a business chatbot, it's don't tell people who the president of the United States is. You know, just answer questions that are related to the context that I've given you. So maybe it's more along those lines, I think. But
yeah, I mean, I guess I find it funny because it's like, I mean, training a model is a thing.
Yeah.
And the training of the model is, you know, like taking the source data and then creating the, you know, the vector representation of all of the knowledge of humanity and building the actual large language model and all the weights that are associated with that. And that's a very expensive, like, specific thing to do. I find it just kind of curious when people are talking about training it, like, well, are you actually assuming here that you're changing the model in some sort of way, or are you actually trying to change? Because there are ways that you can do some sort of like edge reinforcement learning on the model and adjust some of the weights so you get more predictable like outputs for specific industries and verticals or areas. And yeah, like I guess I see it as a bit of a myth because it becomes one of these things where people expect a lot more out of the thing than they've put in. So you'd say, like, this model has been trained to be good in the legal industry. Yeah. And that sounds like that's better. Because you'd say, like, oh, well, ChatGPT knows this. And this one is the legal version of ChatGPT, so it's better in the legal area. And you're like, well, but then what do you think it means to be retrained in the legal area? And, like, what are you actually trying to get the LLM to do versus, like, another part of the system? So one of the things I think we talk about a decent amount would be, like, it's not that the whole computer is now the LLM. That's like a bit of an odd way to think about it. Like, the LLM inside is like part of the computer. It's the bit that's really good at talking to the human or in understanding what the human wants to do or applying like just a minute bit of intelligence. It's not the best bit at fact recall. So I think what often people are trying to do when they talk about training models is that what they really want is, I want the model to respond with certain facts. I want it to know certain things that it doesn't know based from its base model. And I think that's a reasonable want. I guess I find the approach to it like a little bit counterintuitive, where I feel like I am rambling a bit here. So if I am, stop me, but I'll keep going.
No, it's interesting.
But like, this is like a related myth, which would be like, oh, the models get better. Right, and it comes to the same sort of thing where people will look at whether an LLM knows something and use that as a proxy for whether it is intelligent or not and whether it needs to get better. And I sort of recoil a little bit on this because I think it's just entirely the wrong framing for how to deal with these things and what you need. Like, you shouldn't really be relying. In fact, and you know what, I'm going to bring it back to something that's trending at the moment in a second, which is context engineering. So let's not forget about that. Which is that, like, it's not really the job of the model to know stuff. And you probably shouldn't lean into that, really, because it is fallible in that sense. It is just a like probabilistic model. It's a probabilistic recalling of things, and it will make mistakes and it will make hallucinations. But it will talk to you nicely. And there's just better ways of dealing with facts. And the best way to get like good fact recall from these things is inside the context engineering, and it's to come up with systems that tell the thing the facts prior to you asking the question. So it's like, here's my question, here's the answer, now tell me the answer in a nice way. And we can do all of that like inside these systems. It's just like expecting it to be somehow trained into the language model component is to me, it's like trying to get like a hammer to screw in a nail, like, or, screw in a nail anyway. You screw in a screw, like
you hammer the nail.
You can hammer a screw in. It's just going to make a mess. And you'll get something roughly correct, but you'd be better off with a screwdriver.
That's it.
In that instance of time. So.
How much of this do you think is just marketing speak, though?
I mean, I think it is marketing speak, but it kind of shows that there's just a misunderstanding there. And it's a misunderstanding, I think, that holds people back from building what you should build. Which is the version where you use the LLM for what it's good at, which is the translation between like human language and machine world. Like they're brilliant at this. Like we can move from, I can say things, it can pick out the intent, it can map it into like a structured data source, we can process it like using normal tools that we would use, instead of what you see getting thrown out there is like LLMs are an entirely new paradigm of computing.
Yeah.
And like everything changes now, and it's like, no, like the interface changes massively.
Yeah.
Because we can talk to the computer.
Yeah.
Which we've said a million times on this podcast.
I think there's a myth there as well. We can
Okay.
we can explore later. But no, I think this is really interesting. Like the other aside to this maybe, and I don't know if this is the right tangent to go down here, but it's the notion that like you need the big frontier model for everything. And I feel like everyone wants the Ferrari, even though they're just driving to the shops. You know, it's that kind of mentality. I think, like I started reading, I haven't finished reading, but upon reflection, I feel like finishing this research paper would have been quite handy for today. But there's a NVIDIA research paper out where they were talking about the small language model is actually like the better use case for like agentic AI.
Yep.
This is like the probable MVP for agentic AI in the future, because you know it is just you don't need the big language model for everything on these like smaller repeatable tasks that are, you know, the kind of the mainstay of most commercial workflows. You could just get the SLM.
Yep.
And that will be more than functional, but it's probably, you know, more economic as well to run. And
it's almost like the lazy versus the person that's done the work in a way that like it's you can cover a lot of holes by just throwing a massive language model at it.
Yeah.
And doing everything with Sonnet 4.
Yes.
But it's more expensive, but it's still so much cheaper than humans that
it doesn't matter.
Like, why? Who cares?
Yeah.
But like you can do, like it's the bit that you're being lazy in is you're not decomposing the question and the intent and finding data that matches this and actually like engineering the context. You know, building the context for the final response that you need, and doing that is going to be, you know, that could be like 20 LLM calls, and you know they need to be thought through, and you need to think about how you structure the agents in that way. And it's easier to just go like, oh well, I just ask Claude and take whatever it says as gospel, and then like the the model will get better and it will know more stuff, and therefore I don't have to do any of the other things around how I manage my data, how I build memory over time, how I build like a self-improving system here. I just throw bigger and bigger models at it, but they're cheaper than humans, so who cares? Yeah. And like I mean, it could be that is just like a solid left curve approach to this that just steamrolls everything else. maybe I'm a bit mid-curve on this one.
But how much of this is just a byproduct of people's interactions with AI being through, you know, the
basically only using ChatGPT.
They're only using the one interface, and so it's, you know, prompt response. Whereas if you think about it through the lens of like building plumbing, you know, the plumbing of the business becomes agentic. What's the right model for the various decomposed steps in the plumbing? Then, like, and I know I led with it's potentially more economic to use the small language model, but maybe the right animus is just to say like it's powerful enough and more operationally suitable to use the small language model for those tasks.
Yeah, so one of the, I think that's it, like they're quicker as well. Like one of my favorite, I tend to use models at like either end of the curve, where I'll go, if I really want something where I want a good answer and it to be predictable, I will use like generally like Sonnet 4. If I use something where I'm just doing quick classifications, lookup, summarization, like adjustments of data, I'll use like a smaller Llama model on Grok Cloud, because it's almost like 50 times quicker from the API response than getting it from OpenAI. So in the time that I've sent like one request to OpenAI, I could have processed 10 different steps in a different cloud. And that's meaningful to how
it's
quickly
meaningful
something
at scale.
does. And what you can do is like like fractions of the cost. I can actually do some quite complex analysis on like what is this person trying to achieve, and then what supporting data can I bring to the table to help them here, and then I can give that to Claude, and then Claude gets like a nice, concise, final version. So, Claude doesn't need to retain any of the history of the conversation, so we don't get these blowout costs.
Yeah.
Because I can just have a cheaper model summarize the conversation so far.
Yeah.
It's like throw out all the details, give me just the bullet point list of like what we've discussed in order in this conversation so far.
Yeah.
And like that can go to Claude alongside it. Like we can really like think about what we put into its context window. Again, like this is the other like myth is that big context windows are great.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah.
Like you don't, like on the whole, yes, maybe it's better, but all you're doing is adding more nonsense into what you're telling it. It's like saying like, oh, this is great because I can just spout all of this shit into this context window and it'll still respond. And it's like, yeah, up to about 50% of filling the context window it can. Then it just goes massively downhill. And so on the margin, it's better if it has this big context window. But all you've really done is been a bit lazy in how you've implemented this. And somebody else will just come along and do it for, a tenth of the price. Which, maybe right now, if we're in that early adoption period, it is probably less of an issue.
Yeah.
But like it's likely that you're going to end up having to redo it, or somebody else will outcompete you or get better responses because they're not putting nonsense. Maybe on the margin it just means that 1 in 1,000 times, like their model doesn't hallucinate, but yours does, because you just chuck everything into the context window.
Yeah.
You're just it's a trade-off balance always. You want to put enough stuff in that you can get a really good answer to the question, but not too much.
Yes.
Because anything else that you put in just increases that risk of hallucinations. And like as we see in all the examples of why AI is terrible, like it's the hallucinations that are the things that undo you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that you process like 100 support requests correctly. It's the 101 where you then give away like a $10,000 voucher or something.
That's true.
You don't
Yeah.
control it properly.
Although I do think there's like an associated myth here with error tolerance expectations around the language model versus like what we tolerate with the human in the workplace anyway. But let's park that one. We'll come back to it because I think that's like another tangent. But this is interesting
because we're not going to come back.
There's
to
two.
anything.
There's two there. I've got them mentally queued. I'm probably going to figure out this before the end of the episode, but they're queued there mentally.
Yeah.
No, because this is really interesting because I think again this is like a byproduct of how people are using AI in their own day to day, and maybe it's because we're thinking about it more from a workflow perspective and more from a commercial application perspective, that we're just seeing that there's like a right time and place for different types of models. But there's also a marketing component or a sales component to this as well, because every man and his dog who's trying to sell some sort of AI solution is trying to dress it up as the great big Ferrari. It's the sexy beast that every business needs to have.
Yeah.
And, that makes sense for them because they're selling something that's new, and we're still in this period where there's this like great informational asymmetry that exists between the people who actually understand AI and using it and the people that don't but need it. And so I think there's just like a byproduct there as well. But yeah, for me the question is also about like, it's like a monolithic worldview around like the big model for everything versus like a more modular approach. And I think this probably will come back a few times, but I've been thinking about like modular applications just in the real world, you know, and having like when we build like buildings and things like that, like can we build more modularly that is more, I guess, tailored to more individualistic requirements rather than here's like a house design, this is how we always build them, things like that. And then I was thinking about this through the lens of building software as well, because software and, Web 2.0 was always very, and it's kind of like this inch deep, mile wide approach because you just want to ship this one thing that works for as many people as possible. And I think this big unlock is going to be.
So I was also thinking about the similar paradigm in software the other day, but I was thinking it from the view of like we might make microservices actually exist finally. I'm sure because like this whole service-driven architectures and like API first and there's all these like different architecture patterns and microservices for like how you should build businesses in a way, and like all the software inside your business in a way that it's so loosely coupled and defined and everything's controlled by these different interfaces so that you can you can alter this thing over here and you actually don't have to touch any of the other systems because they all respect their own interfaces and their lines
Yes.
and stuff. And it's everybody would get like super into this idea and then they try and implement it, and then they just like throw it all away because it was just like it's so much like extra work to do this in a way. But what's interesting is that we're not writing any of the code anymore.
That's true.
And so you can just, but it is, and it's almost perfect for this paradigm where you say, all right, I need to be able to change this thing, and I'm reasonably happy that this could fuck up, but I need to make sure I'm not fucking up like the other 50 things I'm relying on down the line here. Yeah. So if you take that sort of, and this, I've found this in my own like building of things at the moment, is like, okay, I'm just taking like a very like microservice based approach to this. Everything is just loosely coupled, like extensive use of like message queues and like structured APIs to just pull different parts of the project apart. So I can be like, all right, I'm just implementing this API. It makes it so much easier. Again, it's like doing the context work we talked about earlier. Like big thing is like, I just want you to build this.
Yeah.
And if this works, I know it will fit into everything else, because everything else is structured in a way that it just assumes if I give you this, you give me that. And there's no more of a contract than that going on at that level, that we can build things in small components and then just plug them all together, which has been cool. But
well, it's never been like economically viable to build like that, because everything's been you know, basically been a byproduct of the venture capital model. So you want to build the version of the thing that will flow.
I don't think it's a venture capital thing, because like the way I've seen it in the enterprise IT is not venture capital driven, but it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
But it's just cost constrained. It's just like you pay per line of code effectively, right? And people are slow at writing lines of code, and this is a much better way of structuring a program, but just requires way more code.
Yes.
And so it was just uneconomical to get it done. Like timelines and pressures of project delivery would always push people into, but we could just do this.
But you don't have those pressures when you're building something from scratch. You do have the cost consideration there, but that is something that is essentially enabled by venture capital. That's where
I'm not saying that venture capital is not bad and hasn't done
No.
that. I'm just saying there's not a venture capital thing.
I'm just validating my thought process around it, because I do think like this is more of a consideration for startups. Like if you are building a product from scratch, like this is the animus. If you're within the enterprise, you're building something, then you're right. You've got a whole other you've got a whole range of bureaucratic aspects as well.
It's a different set of constraints that also lead you down the same path of not doing it properly.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you would think in some ways you could justify it because you take a longer term view of it, and you say, well, it's going to make it easier to maintain in the future. So, and that's always why it starts like that.
Yeah.
But if anything, like startups probably overinvest a lot more in their tech, and you probably have better tech stacks than a lot of them. And they throw them away more readily.
True.
Whereas enterprise, so a different set of animus is like that one. I wouldn't pin it. I mean, VCs do plenty of things, so we can pin it.
We can attack them on plenty of stuff.
But not that one.
I think the underlying myth here, though, if we're connecting it back to the theme, is that maybe the GUI for AI shouldn't be necessarily chat based. And I think everyone's kind of locked into chat as the GUI for AI longer term. And I feel like the opportunity here is to build like these kind of more adaptive interfaces. Because like if you think about it from like an educational learning standpoint, like we kind of have an understanding that everyone learns in different ways, and everyone like interacts with information in different ways.
Yep.
And so it's like the chat interface is essentially trying to force everyone's working style through the same square hole. And I just wonder like to what degree we'll get to a point where we can build more of these adaptive interfaces.
It sort of makes everything real time as well, like which is, like if you're working on like building a product with a team, for instance, like there's one style of working which is just like we're in Slack at the same time, and we're just constantly talking, and we just make the changes on the fly as we're talking here, and we almost don't document everything. Like this Slack channel is our documentation. I'm going to go, and it's almost like that, I think, when you're working in a chat interface constantly, is that you're just assuming that everything is in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the nice things about working in something like Cursor or Rue Code or whatever IDE people are using these days is that it will, because it has access to the terminal and the ability to write files, it will just write out files that you can then look at and go, okay, that's the plan. and it feels different because you're writing. It's like you're writing a document together, and that's like a slightly different way of doing it. So that moves you out of the real time, but it's still very, I don't know, it's still very in the moment and text based. It's kind of hard to like sometimes remove yourself from that and then come back to it like a week later, because I've just had a wife's been away for a couple of weeks, and so like my head like it's been super like focused on the kids, making sure everything's going well in the family, and then like come back to stuff and I'm like, fuck, what was I doing like last week? Like it becomes so much harder to pick stuff up where previously you were just in a flow constantly with it. And then I found this week I've been shout out Crispy, friend of the pod. He was asking about Flowwise as a tool, and I used it a lot in version 1. I briefly looked at it in version 2, but I wasn't that fussed. And I picked it up recently again with version 3, and the version 3 of it is really good. Like they've resolved most of the problems that I had with the thing, and it's a very like nice visual tool to build AI agents. And so I've been reacquainting myself with that a little bit. I like this because, as you said, like going back to the education thing, I'm a very visual person. So if you remove me out of, I can exist in a chat flow, but really what I want is a massive whiteboard with all the stuff on it.
Yeah.
And so it's quite nice to come back to Cursor. I can just see the code visually. And it just makes it so much easier to know, okay, what did I do? How did that work again? Like, what did I need to do? Like, I can't stare at code and then visualize it in the same way that I can using a tool like that. So I think you will get, like, because I was very much of the opinion early doors that the UI disappears and it just becomes like, I'm going to tell you to do this, and you're going to do it instead, and I don't have to do it anymore. And therefore, what I need is just a phone, and I'll just tell you using my voice. I still think that's like the ideal use case, but then that's the giving of the instruction and maybe the checking up of the instruction. But even if I'm working in a team of a bunch of people, what I really want is a massive fucking whiteboard. That's all the stuff laid out on it that I can see what's going on.
Well, I think this is where the adaptive quality that I was talking about kicks in, because you need to be able to essentially switch between different paradigms. If you're working with a team, you kind of need the interface to shift with you. If you're working in isolation, you kind of need it to be something a bit different. Yes. And this is where I think like the modular building, like it's kind of like having Lego blocks. And I feel like if you can code faster, this should just be more like viable now to just build out, a series of modular Lego blocks that enable you to have an adaptive platform. And you also mentioned flow state, which I think we kind of glossed over, but I feel like the best products just enable you to stay in flow state a lot longer. Like I think of something like I think spreadsheets do this like really well. Like spreadsheets are a great example, right? Because there's so much technical complexity in what you can achieve using a spreadsheet, but that doesn't limit the vast majority of people using a spreadsheet for whatever they kind of need to do with it. You know what I mean? Like if I want to get, like what I would use it for in a banking environment would be completely different to what someone might use it for in like their own day-to-day life to just track a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. And
what I love about it is you have this ability to just ramp up and ramp down, and it just suits pretty much everyone to do everything.
I mean, it's got a very simple UI. Right? Is that there's a grid of data.
Yep.
And the rules aren't enforced in any way. Like there's conventions for how you would expect the grid to behave.
Yeah.
But you can alter it.
It's malleable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, it's like there's something about that interface that is very, it's very quick to pick up and put down, right? And you can look at a spreadsheet and again, because of the conventions and the norms of how we've used it over time, you kind of know what's going on.
Yeah. I think there was this notion like for the last couple of decades really that if you could build something out in a spreadsheet, it would make a good piece of software. And that's probably the thing you want to go and build, but we never actually asked the question, like, should we not just use the spreadsheet? Like, is that not suitable? Is that not workable for some reason?
Oh, there were always problems with spread. Again, like,
there are, of course,
this is like a classic enterprise IT bit.
Yeah.
Like just
there's like
the
version
data doesn't
control
exist
and stuff
anymore.
like that.
The versions,
Yeah,
mistakes,
it really depends what you're doing.
The stuff, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know when I was at Rolls-Royce, like they used to exist on spreadsheets. And they're very advanced, very complex spreadsheets, very well looked down, well version controlled. but they ran like a massive like quality first organization entirely from spreadsheets.
Yeah.
It's not obvious that moving to SAP did them any favors.
But it is like just an incredibly durable tool. Like you can use it for just about anything. Like if you want to just like, do like your own personal budget for the week, you can do that, or you can build like a massive, financial model that is really complex with macro. You like literally can scale it up and scale it down as you need. And there isn't necessarily the constraint built into the product, if you know what I mean. Like it is like the closest thing to an adaptive product that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, I would. There's some in there about that, right? I mean, I guess when I think about like interfaces, I mean, there's definitely like voice.
Yeah.
Like in the way that being able to dialogue backwards and forwards is better than me writing you a letter and waiting for you to write me a letter back and doing everything via, IMs and
yes.
Because you can just interrupt people halfway through a thought, stuff like which is maybe sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but you can. But then you can quickly adjust for that, and so I think that's the right paradigm for the communication. But I did a project years ago with Woodside. We looked at collaboration. The idea was to take this like 50-year view of like, well, what's collaboration? Because this project was worth $100 billion they were working on, and the question was like, okay, well, if we're going to like have a collaboration system for the future, what should it look like? And so it's like, okay, well, the way we'll approach this is we'll look at like everything that's going on, but we'll do it from first principles, and we'll build up and say like, well, what does good collaboration look like? And like one like just a little throwaway line I used a lot that seemed to resonate with people like if you just put a bunch of engineers in a room and ask them to design something, like, what do you think they're going to do? And it would be like, well, first of all, they're all going to stand up again. They're not going to sit at the table. They're going to walk over to that whiteboard and they're going to start drawing stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, this is really interesting as an idea, because you go, well, why is this? It's like, why is it that we seek to draw stuff on a whiteboard and not the piece of paper in front of our desk? Is it because like the piece of paper is too small? Like, could we just have a big piece of paper? If we have a big piece of paper, what do we do with it? It's like, we orient ourselves around it, and the paper becomes the focus, in the same way the wall becomes the focus. And you can start to build up that there's something about the idea that this is an unowned space of ideas.
Yeah.
Like, and I came up with this sort of model for how this worked, of saying like you have people, and people have presence inside a conversation, and then we have like a collaboration space that we'll just term like a canvas or something like that, and people can put stuff on the canvas, and when it's on the canvas, like that's owned by everybody. That's like the group thing that we're all working on. This is like collaboration documents, shared Google Docs and stuff like this, try and go down that way. And then but then you also have like your stuff that you know. And you can have stuff that you know, and you can develop things in your own space that you don't have to show anybody. And that's like you like writing in your own paper and pad and stuff. And then you put it onto the canvas. And then that's the bit that you share. But it's when it goes into this shared space that it actually becomes, like, I don't know, useful and collaborative in a way that, like, I think we need this. This is like, to my mind, like the end goal of something like this. Is you can't ignore that. Like if you've got like just AI agents and we're expecting to only talk to them and review stuff via voice, it's like bringing a bunch of engineers into a room, telling them all to sit on their hands and saying you can't write anything down. And it's like, okay, well, then I'm going to make a bunch of things, and then I might show you a video, or I might just describe it to you using voice, and you're like, well, that's clearly not going to work. So there's clearly going to have to be like some sort of like visual component to how we get this feedback. I mean, I think there'll be a lot less sitting in front of specific screens in order to type stuff out. And I think we can make this way more flexible. But I don't think we get away from the idea of like, we're gonna need big screens to then like just review this stuff on and like think about, okay, well, all right, you're gonna go and do the equivalent of a year's work and then give it back to me 5 minutes later. How the fuck do I review it all?
Well,
what is that form factor?
Well, audio and transcription become valuable in that environment because you're able to just collect all of the minutes of what's being discussed collaboratively, but you don't have someone sitting and typing them, and then that's being transcribed and ingested into a graph database potentially. That's just a collaborative graph that you try to, work your ideas into over time.
Yeah.
But I do think you end up with like these multiple input modalities rather than just voice. You probably do have chat as well, and you've got
and output.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense, but this is kind of also where I was thinking, you probably end up with a more adaptive interface based on what you are actually doing with it and what you need it to do for you, and what's the best input-output modality when you're doing that thing. Like, there are definitely going to be times where it just makes sense to be speaking to it using voice, and then there are other times where you're like, I just need like a quick recall lookup, let me just type it in real fast.
Yeah. It's like the software thing, right? Like, the one way of doing it is that you sit in Cursor and you drive it via an IDE. And even then, you're kind of, a lot of the time, you're sitting in front of an IDE watching it code, which is a bit weird. He says, having done it quite a lot recently. But the other way of doing it would be something like Codex or various other programs where you just dictate it at the repo level and you say, like, build me this pull request, and then you get back the pull request. And the nice bit of that is you don't see all the intermediate file changes, and you just get back something that you can review. And there's something there where there's probably a reason why we have that human style workflow for that.
Yeah.
That is actually just quite a nice way of defining work, getting it done, and then handed back. That I think a lot of the human patterns remain. They just get done quicker. It's like, we talked about the software development methodology, and it's like super quick waterfall. I think we get back into a lot of super quick versions of otherwise human things where we dictate work in the same way. We spec work out before we give it to people because we know it gets better results.
Yeah.
When we deal with humans, we'll do the same with machines.
Yeah.
I think, again, we got lazy there because they could interpret a lot, and they will, left to their own devices. And then you go, oh, well, what if I didn't do that and I did it properly? And you go, oh, I get a much better result.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the question I would have is, you've got this adaptive quality you want to tap into, but the environment's going to change depending on the people who are actually using that interface. So, for instance, you gave the example of a bunch of engineers stood around, they'll go to the whiteboard, right?
Yeah.
But if you ask you ask a similar task of a group of lawyers, are they going to go and stand in front of a whiteboard? Like, I don't know.
No, I don't know.
I don't think they will. So then it's like, okay, are we just...
No, they'll be jobless. They'll be down the cafe.
Yeah.
Just like
but it's a
one can dream.
It's a valid question, right? You just take any group within society that isn't engineers. It's like, this is part of the problem with software development. A lot of times it's built by engineers who don't necessarily fully understand the problem they're trying to solve. And so if you want this thing to be like perfectly adaptive, like, I don't know that that's necessarily the environment you want to build. Well, you don't want to build around that as the kind of the central like underlying process for that platform. But what I would say is, like, I think this like more interesting thing that you said there was around like tapping into flow state, because I feel like it's, like, again, really easy to get into flow state when you're using something like a spreadsheet. Like, you can just pick up where you left off super quickly.
I think that might be your version of the same bias, but
it might be. It might be, but I feel like it's just easier to pick up. But I almost want, like, when you've got these like variable input-output modalities as well, I just wonder if what we're describing is something more like a multiplayer game, and we're able to tap into the dynamics that work in game environments, because like you're obviously having to interact with different modalities, but you're also interacting with other people, and you're trying to achieve a common objective, and there's like this kind of immediate responsive feedback that you're getting as well that keeps you in that flow state while you're playing. I'm not a big gamer, so I'm maybe imagining some of this stuff, but like, I know I'm trying to like think this out on the fly, but I wonder if like there's a lesson for like platform development there as well, where it just enables you to go and like, what are the elements that help us tap into flow states, and then how do we quickly switch to being in a flow state, but then also collaborating with other people.
Yeah.
And what is the environment that enables us to do all of those things while trying to achieve something creative?
So Sorry, it's got something in my eye. Shit, that's distracting. I think there's a couple of things that are coming up. Like, I'll get to flow state as point number 2. I guess like one point on the modalities is that it's not that like I think that's the end goal modality. It's just I think we need, like, it's not obvious to me that we lose screens.
Yeah.
Is my only real point there. Is I think for the visual amongst us, we still need that. I think on the flow state thing, this is kind of interesting, because I don't find that spreadsheets make me enter a flow state necessarily. I know you mean about they can just be so adaptive and they're used all over the place. But I think for your flow state, what you want is, it's almost like the ramp up, ramp down times is like, I can find there's like certain times where I'll just be doing a task like over the course of a couple of weeks and I'm just in it.
Yeah.
I know exactly what's going on. I know where I left off. I can get up the next day and I carry it on. And you know, I'm in that state. And then, you know, my wife goes away for a couple of weeks with my mum on holiday, and it's just gone. Yeah. And then I come back to it and I'm like, am I like an idiot? Like, what was I doing?
Yeah.
Like, I've been writing everything down, but why did I write down nonsense? Like, what is this stuff? And I don't know if you ever I've been rewatching Red Dwarf recently, but there's one where Rimmer's in the exam and he's like, I think it's in the first episode, and he like has everything written on his body. It's just like goes mental. I feel a bit like that sometimes. Yeah. And I think maybe the goal, like, interface aside, like the thing to solve would be how do you ramp the person up and down quickly enough here that you can actually help it manage the work of the AI? Because that's like what we're talking about is kind of like, how do you as a human stay on top of the work that's being done by your fleet of robots that can just do so much that it's massively overwhelming?
Yeah.
And like, again, like if I'm there every step of the way with you know, Rue code or whatever, like when I'm building stuff and I'm forcing it to stop and give me opportunities to test and spec, it's very real time, it's very in flow state, but as soon as you stop, it's almost forgotten like what you did.
Yes.
You were too involved in the doing and not enough in the being of the situation, and like there's a dichotomy there. You can't be both of those things. Maybe this is like where the real like goal of the vibe coding element of this is like, look, you just have to let go. If you're down there, you're not up here, and if you're not up here, then you're not dictating like where we're going and why we're doing stuff. And you can't be both the executor of the job and the planner of the job. They're just different mental constructs, and you will drive yourself insane. So you've got to let that bit go and just let it do its work. So have a good process for how it does it, but then you've got to operate at that sort of higher level.
Yeah. Like, in some ways, it's like forcing us to think in a new way. You know, I think there's, maybe this is another myth, that like we kind of tend to treat AI like a faster productivity tool. You know, it's another layer of productivity that we're like baking on top of all of the things that we do because we want to do it. We want to do it faster at greater volume, greater velocity. You know, I want to get
the wrong thing quick.
Yeah, it's like I want to send out a bunch more emails, and I want to do them faster, and I want to send them to more people, and that's basically, I think, the paradigm or the animus a lot of people are looking at this through.
It's true. I see a lot of stuff on Twitter at the moment. Oh, I scraped Twitter and TikTok and came up with the themes, and then I produced 100,000 videos, and then I just, it's like, God, you're kind of the problem, mate.
Yeah. While you were talking, like the question that was running through my head was like, well, how do we decide what to actually work on? And like, it's like, that's fine. I think that's like uniquely subjective. I think that's going to be really cool to explore. But that's maybe where this myth is, because most people tend to view AI through the lens of productivity rather than creativity. It's like, if we enable AI to just go and do all of the things that keep us busy, then we actually are liberated to go and think through the creative problems we want to go and solve.
I think it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably true too.
Like, I don't want to attribute it too much to people without them being here to talk about it, but like, I've had this discussion with a bunch of people where that's the bit that's hard for people.
Yeah.
It's like, agency is hard. People don't generally have it.
Yeah.
Like, it's scary to suddenly be in charge of your own time.
Yeah.
You know, if you have to get up every day and decide what to do, that's quite confronting to a lot of people.
I do think there's like just two. I can't remember who spoke about this. I was listening to someone talk about convergent, divergent thinking. It's like I think
it might be me.
Was it you? It might have been.
I do talk about this a lot. Like I used to talk about it in terms of like delivery of like products, projects, ideas, various things, and like the role of convergent and divergent thinking. But
I think productivity tools tend to be like they tend to track us down convergent thinking.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So I think if we think through AI through that lens, then we're probably not going to realize all of the value. But if we think about it from the potential that it can create for more divergent thinking, like where we are going and we're having more conversations with people, we're interacting with more pain points, we're experiencing the real world. I think that opens you up to more ideas, more touch points.
This might be us like learning a lot
maybe
of ourselves, if you know what I mean. Because I've been very sold for a long time on this is a productivity like miracle. It's going to be huge. Like it does a lot of the work. But then if you look at like where we're spending a lot of our personal time here with these tools, it's not in being super productive. It's all just like, I'm going to create this like cool thing that I need to exist that's never existed before. And it's the creativity of going like, oh shit, I can just imagine stuff and build it, and I don't need to convince anybody else. I don't need to like write a pitch deck. I can just build the fucking thing.
Well, hang on. Like, if we think about this, like, is this the death of productivity? Like, if AI can just do the thing at scale that we can't do, and we've spent all of our time doing that thing, what is productivity? Because it's basically maxing out productivity, right? Like, and it's always hyper productive. And so I think what's like the more important lens for us then is how are we being creative? How are we like enabling more divergent thinking? I think it's like, and there's also like a whole scope of problems that like emerge that we haven't been thinking about.
There's always
that we might think about differently.
And there's two forms of productivity, right? There's doing stuff quick, and then there's doing the things that mattered in the first place.
Yes.
And so, like, I think what AI does, it just maxes out the doing things quick. The real like goal of productivity has always been stop doing the shit that you weren't supposed to do.
That you weren't meant to do, yeah.
And like, but even on that, it does, because it will get rid of so much busy work that, like, why do it? Like, you don't need to do it, even if you did need to do it. It doesn't matter. It's already done.
It's still being done.
If you can think of it, it's already done. So
you just don't need to do it.
So I think most of that disappears.
This is the classic
It
throwing.
brings us back to the qualia stuff.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
From recently, is like it's actually all about figuring out the problem and the thing to do. It's the only thing that matters anymore.
But also, I do think there is a limit to what AI can actually solve for us creatively. So I think this is like a great point of re-engagement for you. It's like, Rory Sutherland, he's the British guy who was like head of Ogilvy, maybe the big marketing agency.
I know exactly. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's like a super interesting guy.
Yeah.
And he tells a story about like how they were. Like people used to complain in their office building at the kind of the speed of the elevators that were too slow. And so they started thinking about this, and they're like, we could spend millions of dollars trying to like increase the speed of the elevators by 5%. And then what they did was just go and put mirrors in the elevators, because then
people would check themselves out and they don't realize.
It's a psychological application. That is just
amazing.
Fucking brilliant.
Yeah,
right?
he's really good at this sort of reframing of problems into solutions. Like he had another one with the trains.
Oh yeah.
Where he was like, he like resold first class train travel in the UK as being like a private office with Wi-Fi and free coffee. And all the rest of the stuff.
It's brilliant.
And it was like, why are you in a hurry? Like you're trying to get some work done. Like have a couple of hours, take your time, be really comfortable. Like we'll get rid of the plebs. Like give you good Wi-Fi. It's just like, that's way cheaper than pissing away $100 billion and still not having built a fucking train line to Birmingham.
Yeah. But there's something there's something deeply psychological about the framing of that problem and then the solution.
I think it's fucking GG. He's such a good thinker on this stuff. But like he's been talking a lot in the recent No Solution stuff with Pablo about. Like, he always references Viveki, who I've heard talk a bit, but I don't know too much about. But he talks about it as being like the embodiment of the human is the thing that makes the difference, right? Like you as an embodied person can have these experiences, understand these emotions, and actually pick up the difference between it's not actually about the speed of the train, it's about the comfort.
Yes.
It's like when I know there's another one with Rory Sutherland. I think he talks about like there's a huge difference between waiting 10 minutes for a train that you know was going to be 10 minutes and waiting like 5 minutes for a train that you thought was 2 minutes. And like one of them causes you like huge amounts of like anxiety and pain. And like I know exactly what he's talking about. I have this fucking British trains all over the place. But like, it's just, one of them is like, if you know it's going to be half an hour and it arrives at that time, you can plan, and you can figure out what you're going to do. You can go for a nice coffee, you can have a nice little walk. You're not hanging around worried about it. But when you like don't know, I mean, you talked about it in terms of Uber.
It's
like
the
when they put
illusion
the
of
cars on the map and it looked like the cars, as long as the car looks like it's moving towards you,
Yeah.
you're perfectly happy to just like relax, and you'll just deal with it when it gets here.
Yeah.
But if you don't and you don't know, like you're just going to throw it out.
Exactly.
And I think these insights only come from the quality, from the embodiment of the soul, right? Like it's
lived experience, right? You can't substitute that. Like I think
I feel like that's kind of a polluted term these days, but
maybe. But I think I think it works there. I think the other aspect to it is like if we were trying to solve the elevator problem as an engineering problem, we might go and like work through all of the stages to go and like operationalize like an increase in speed while maintaining safety in the elevator, and what's the cost, and what's like the how do we project manage this out. And that's just like the simple, problem solution statement. Let's just go and create a faster elevator.
Man, that said, I bet you can get a bunch of like nuts off the wall suggestions
Probably.
from a set of LLMs.
You
You go
could,
like, you know what, they're pretty good. You'd be like, we need to solve train travel. It's not fast enough. Can you think outside the box and tell me a bunch of things that we could do instead that don't solve that problem, but maybe help the situation?
Yeah.
And I bet it gives you like, why don't, I remember this was one of his where he said like, people say that like the Eurotunnel takes too long, it's not quick enough, and it's quite expensive. And I thought, well, why don't we just, instead of trying to speed it up, and that's going to cost like $100 billion, why don't we just hire a bunch of Playboy models to serve champagne to everybody?
Yeah.
And he's like, I bet you what, everybody's going to ask for the train to be slower.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yep.
Yeah, exactly.
That's.
But I wonder, like, I think it's the point of inception, right? Like now, there's like a body of work thinking outside the box where the LLM can tap into that. Whereas at the time, someone like Rory Sutherland is going, do you know what? Let's just put a fucking mirror in the elevator. It might be just such new thinking that there's just not enough context for an LLM to figure that out. Like now we're looking at it going, we see mirrors in every elevator everywhere. So not a big deal.
Well, that's what I think you could just. We talk about this all the time, right? Like, it's not obvious to me that it's not achievable that you can't just generate a bunch of crazy ideas.
Yeah.
And like the question will be like, there's something about the human being the embodied soul. That is the thing that reacts to it and goes, as soon as you hear mirror in the elevator, you go, of course, because everybody's just looking at themselves.
Yes.
And like you've
Makes
got
so much sense. Yeah.
But
that's the
like, how would I
genius.
evaluate that if I was the LLM? I just go, they put a mirror in the elevator. It's not obvious that it would be able to evaluate that. Like, oh fuck, that's genius. It wouldn't have that gut reaction to something like that. It's like, the strippers on the Eurotunnel. Oh fuck, like, obviously. Yeah. Like a bunch of people are going to start taking that. That would work. It's just I think you need the person in the world. Yeah. But it just flows back to like, that's probably the last bit. So I mean, certainly then the generation.
But the crazy thinking is still valid, I think, with the language model, because that can help you generate more thoughts as well.
Exactly.
So there is the simulating of the collaborative element as well, I think. But I think you're right about qualia. I think this is going to become more and more like talked about. I think more and more people are going to clue onto the fact that we just need to figure this out. Like what is like the final frontier for the human? Just go and own that. Build businesses in that space.
Yeah.
Like it's funny. I was thinking about this recently. Like because you kind of mentioned the fear part, right? It's like everyone's just really fucking terrified about the loss of agency, or like this.
Well, it's not the loss of agency. It's the having agency.
Yes.
Like, it's the like shit. I need to decide what to do with my day. Yeah. Like it's.
This is the question.
It's bred out of you, right?
It's like if you go back to like, go back in the time machine, you get the chance to speak to a few like medieval peasants, and you go and tell them, hey guys, like, in the not too distant future, no one is going to farm their own food. Like, do you reckon they would just be like freaked out by that? Like, is that dystopian to them, or is it just like, oh wow, I can be free and like?
I mean, when you go back to those times, themselves. Like there's some like good books on like something like How to Be Idle. A good set of stuff on this where he would analyze this, and like they actually had a pretty nice life. It's like they would be in the fields, but they're in the fields for like 4 hours a day, but they spend most of their time basically hanging out with their mates and their family.
Yeah.
And like
in the sun.
Eating deal. They're outside all day, and you're like, it's like, so I always think that you go back to them and you go, you know, in the not too distant future, everybody's going to be like sitting in a bullshit office working for 8 to 10 hours a day under a fluorescent light.
Yeah.
For like a minute period of time in human society, and then it all just disappears again. And we go back to just being outside all the time, experiencing shit. Like it's, I don't even know. It just seems like it's so far removed in some ways from how we live that I think it's just hard to figure out what that looks like. But you do want something there, right? Like there's something about your interface into AI agent world, whatever that is. I don't think it's an AI. I think it's a set of stuff that you're going to need to own at some level. Yeah. Where you need your stuff to be recorded. You need the thing that is helping you record stuff to understand what you know and what you don't know and where you were at and what you were trying to achieve. Like it needs to know this stuff to be useful, because that's how it's going to help you ramp up. Like when you come back to a task, it's going to need to scaffold for you and say like, okay, this is what we were doing, this is where we were going. You go, okay, yeah, I remember. Now I'm back in it. Like it needs to augment you in that way, and it needs to be somewhat omnipresent and follow you around. To be aware of all of that stuff, I think it's going to have to be somewhat under your control. I mean, I still think like Paul used to talk about, like just, you know, you imagine like a PS3 or PS whatever we're on.
Whatever.
It's probably not free. That's probably really old now. Maybe it's like a 5 or 10 or something. But like, you know, this thing's got GPUs out the wazoo. Like we've been no stranger to putting GPUs in our house and like using it to run stuff. There'll be something like that with a bunch of storage bolted on in everybody's house. And then that runs your models and your graphs or whatever that you've got, and you just feed back to it. That makes a lot of sense to me as like an endpoint. And then like how you interface with it is going to have to be auditory. It's going to have to be visual. Like it's going to have to. It's going to need to know. It is going to need to know so much, because this is like you see it in the trying to stop doing. I mean, so the campfire stuff, right?
Yeah.
You did it.
Yep.
You moved on to other stuff.
Yep.
You came back to it.
Yes.
Like how hard was it to pick that project up again?
It was seamless.
Really?
I think it was a lot easier than I thought it would be.
Is it because you got Claude to tell you what you were doing?
Well, to some degree, yeah. I mean, I'm always working with a partner on this stuff in some ways, but I think maybe this is the wrong example. I would use like maybe other pieces of, like other products that I'm trying to build. Like I definitely have this problem.
Yeah.
Where I lose track of it. I think.
Maybe it's just my head.
No. I totally get it. I absolutely get it.
Like, this is cancelling. I've just realised that my head is broken.
No, not at all. Like the campfire. Like I want to talk about like the other products that I'm working on.
Just say it,
but I think like that is because there's like a heap of, like there's the technical implementation complexity, but I'm also trying to rationalize through a set of problems that I have to think through. And that is like mentally taxing. Whereas the campfire scene, I was like, all right, I need to add a third person into this. I've got a very clear idea of what it is I need to do. And I've got the ability to figure out how to implement those changes, and I just did it. And it was actually quite mostly seamless. But it also didn't really have any mental load to go and execute on it.
Okay.
But I think like with the other subset of problems that I'm working around, like with like simulated audiences like that, like essentially the problem there is like how do I get the output to match what a real world output would be? Because in my mind, if there's no causal link between the two sets of outputs, then like the product is useless. Basically, it's just vaporware. So if you can get a simulated audience to actually track with a human cohort pretty similarly, pretty consistently, then I think it's got real value. And I'm sure people have solved this problem, and I'm just still trying to wrap my head around how to solve it. But I feel like there's like a lot more mental load there, so I tend to just drop off and I'll go and do something else that's a bit easier, and I'll come back to it. And like, it very much depends on head state.
Yeah.
So I'd say that is like a way better example of what you're describing, and I don't think that's subjective.
So it's
like
not just me as well.
No, I absolutely have that to deal with as well. But there's also like, I mean, we're also human. There's a bunch of other like human elements that just get in the way, that take up that mental load as well.
Oh,
that
yeah,
impacts what you're able to do.
They're not even like, it's not even that they get in the way. They're the better bits.
That's true.
I mean, it's just that like I've really enjoyed like being like way more connected with the kids in the last 2 weeks. It's just that it's I have not done a ton of work on stuff that I wanted to progress, which is fine. You know, I got all the stuff done.
But I do think it's fascinating because, like, to go full circle on this chat, like I think we've been just super creative. Like I actually feel like I spend the vast majority of my time doing creative things, almost to the detriment of doing the things that need to be done productively sometimes.
Yes.
And I've got like, getting the balance right is actually really challenging at times, because I'll burn through a bunch of hours and go, fuck, should have done like some other things, because you know, you need the
so the way I
need the money rolling.
Rationalize this to myself.
Yes, good. Tell me.
Is that I, like, whilst I might have like the big thing that I'm progressing, I will take like elements of that thing, and then I'll go and like just creatively try out different solutions to like things that I like, building blocks that I know I need over here. I will be piloting over here. It's still going. Okay. It's in a way that I can like be creative with it. I can just go off. I can vibe code shit. I don't need to keep it. It's not going to derail this bigger thing. But if I just go through that creative process, I know that I'll come back to like, I mean, all the stuff that we've been doing recently with graphs around, like just like really trying to like just explore all the different use cases and like really get into intuiting the use of them is like, it's all just building that intuition and that muscle memory. It's like, okay, I know how I'm going to apply this across so many more different use cases now than I did. But previously I would know theoretically, like, okay, well now I can intuit it a lot better, and it just makes a lot more sense. And I think you just need that space to play. Yes. And to have a bunch of experiments that go, yeah, that didn't really teach me anything with that one. So I'll try a new one, and then, okay, now I get it. And eventually you break through and you find the thing that helps for what you do. That's how I rationalize my spending time playing with tech that I find interesting.
Yeah, I think the other aspect to it is like, how easily can you pick it up and start again, which is what I like about being able to just code at the speed of thought. You know, like that's what's really like been the unlock for me, because like otherwise there's this, I mean, that's technical debt, right? Like, you just build up this.
Or do you even need to? That's hopefully the end game, is that you don't have to pick it up again. You just throw it away and redo it.
Well, when you're playing and
someone
learning,
else picks it up,
you tend to just break shit. Well, I tend. This is probably just a me thing, but I tend to break shit a lot. But I don't mind so much as long as I know why I've broken it, because then there is this whole like lateral learning piece that I can do something completely orthogonal to it and go, I've got to be mindful of that thing that I did before.
This is why I try and create the sandboxes that I can break stuff without it breaking a bigger thing.
Yes.
It's like, let's sandbox over here and break that over and over and over again until I understand it, and then bring it back in. The only problem is sometimes you go over there and you experiment enough and you go, you know what, everything I did before is wrong. Like, I should redo all that again. But
so is the idea here that work in the future resembles play more than work?
Hopefully. I mean, play is better.
It's kind of cool.
And it's way better for learning, right? There's so much data on that.
It's interesting. I don't know how we got there, actually, from like,
I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Adaptive interfaces, but yeah, you know, like there's something there.
I think that makes sense. Like, why, like, it feels a bit like the whole, you know, like, do a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life sort of approach to stuff, where you go, okay, you know, maybe work just becomes play and we just do stuff we enjoy, and then we figure out the bits that are stopping us enjoying it, and then we make those better, and then that's life, and that sounds all right.
I think maybe we touched on this a little bit with Joel last week as well, you know, around creativity or craft, right? It's like, that's a question I think about sometimes, is like, what's, like, you were just doing like a bit of a renovation at home using your hands, right? I mean, I think that's like there's like an interesting set of skills that exist there that are just super relevant. And I just wonder, like, how do we figure out what craft means along the lines of also like life's work? You know, like life's work always tended to be like there tended to be like some implicit linearity baked in there where you're just like you're going on like down a track and you're just like constantly stacking a bunch of skills along that track, and maybe there are some that are ancillary to either side of it, but generally there's a defined path. And yeah, I don't know what like life's work looks like, you know, when you've got, you know, creative freedom to go and explore, and you've got agency, and you can pick skills up probably a bit faster, but there is the qualia aspect that I don't think you can shortcut either.
No, you have to go and do. You have to do stuff.
Do stuff.
To be stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it's. Just, I mean, maybe it is like the. Who's the quote? It's William Gibson, I think, isn't it? Like the future's here, it's just not evenly distributed.
Yeah.
And the future was here, like for the Victorian gentleman, it just was very, very not evenly distributed at that time.
Yeah.
But we'll all end up as this sort of like, all right, we have leisure. Like the cost of stuff falls, and hopefully, you know, took our advice, you buy just a tiny bit of Bitcoin, and therefore you'll be fine and you'll eat forever. So that's good.
Yeah.
Like even with modest amounts, I think. But you know, if the price of everything goes down to zero and nobody can do any work because it's all being done for free, effectively, well, okay, well then your needs are probably taken care of, and now you have leisure, and you need to figure out, well, what do you do? And you'll find hobbies. Some of the hobbies might just fill your time. Some of the hobbies might improve stuff for other people.
Yeah.
Even if you're just doing stuff that fills your time, you're probably going to then become better at it as a craft, and then maybe you share that. Like yeah, it sounds more like play to me. It's like you go and experience and do stuff that you have energy towards. I mean, it might not be that. I say that just because it might not be that it's about doing stuff that you actively enjoy, mate, because maybe your thing is that you just like going finding stuff out, and it's not that enjoyable at the moment. Like, I'm going to be the guy that puts his hand in the bee's nest.
Yeah.
Shit.
I mean, I do think, and this is not something I necessarily agree with, but I do think there's this implied assumption here that AI is so effective that it can just go and do all of the productive work for us. And I think depending on who you speak to, that's where the doubt exists in most people's minds. And I think this is maybe the other myth that we touched on earlier, was that like we have like an unrealistic expectation for error tolerance from AI, which I understand, but we don't often apply the same lens to the human working through the same set of processes.
Yeah, a human could get 9 things out of 10 correct, but if that's what an AI does, it's crap.
It's a problem. Yeah.
I mean, usually when I say stuff like, oh, and then the cost of everything goes to zero and we don't have jobs, I mean, I'm thinking quite far in the future of undefined date. But yeah, I think that's a fair myth. I mean, I do hope that work goes more like play. That sounds nice.
It does sound nice, yeah. I think, I do think this is the hold up though. This is the challenge that people have wrapping their heads around it. It's maybe twofold. One is the interface is always the same. I'm talking to ChatGPT, I'm asking it to do like the big thing it can't do, it's not built for. And then the other aspect is, well, it didn't do all of those things, it made a bunch of errors, it made up a bunch of shit. And so therefore it's just not accurate enough to use in any setting that will be able to liberate me from the work that I do, the productive, busy work that I do. And that's the disconnect that exists now that perpetuates that myth. But I do just think it's a myth because we have unrealistic expectations for error tolerance with AI and AI agents. So whereas like humans, like we're almost way more tolerant because we understand all of the like the external drivers for why that mistake might have been made. It's like, oh, they're not yet experienced, they've got to learn, you know, or they're having a bad day, or there's something going on outside of the workplace. And there's like a whole heap of reasons which are valid for why people make mistakes. And people just make mistakes. Like we all just make mistakes, and that's fine, you know, and they all have costs associated to them, especially in commercial settings. And we try to mitigate them as much as possible with systems and processes. And so, when I think about this, I'm like, okay, well, what are the systems and processes we need to put in place to actually mitigate the error rate for AI and enable them to do the things that we do at the kind of speed, scale, and velocity that we need them to, rather than just going, I'm going to wait for AGI, I'm going to wait for a better model.
Exactly,
and I think that's the risk.
Yes. Yeah, and I think what we're going to find is that all those things that we put in place are all the same things that we put in place for humans.
For humans, yeah.
They're just going to be like nicher and quicker.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Like, it's just that you're going to process the intelligence in smaller blocks. So you've got to do that thinking, and then you put the same sort of tools in, but you've got to be aware that the loop on this is like, might have been like, you know, once a year, and then now it's like every 5 minutes. It's just going to be, it's the speed of things is just different.
Interesting. Work more like play. Is that a potential
I feel like
title?
that's the title, because it feels like it could be clickbaity enough to
Death
work.
of productivity.
We're bad at,
It's another one I
we're
think
bad
that
at
came up.
clickbaity titles. I think something like in the future,
Work's more
work
like
is
play.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like, there's also like, that's optimistic, I think. I like that there's, like, for me anyway, I'm speaking my book, I would prefer work to feel more like play.
Well, if I feel like we've done one thing here, like in the last sort of year and a half, it's that we just put ourselves in that world and said, all right, well, let's just go and work like that and see what it's like.
We're the guinea pigs.
And what we've done is we've ended up playing a lot more with work.
Yeah, it's true.
So, N of 2. Yeah.
That's true. I like that.
Have you done more work with play? Have you found that your play is more like work, or vice versa? Why not tell us in the comments, like and subscribe?
Yeah, very good.
Sometimes I remember that we're recording the
We're
podcast.
actually recording a podcast,
Yeah.
Who knows?
All right.
Let's
we're
wrap
coming
that
up.
one.
We're coming to the end, but
Pretty
maybe
good.
before we wrap, let's just do a quick.
Do we have shout outs?
Yeah, I was just going to have a look in Fountain and see who I need to shout out. Who I need to
Do we
shout
get any
out.
questions or anything?
Well, Crispy was asking about Flowwise,
Which
so
you
covered that.
covered that
Check.
one. Very good.
Check, done. So I think we're still on the same guys. We've got Crispy, Bundaberg Hoddle, BTC Shelling Point, and Sean. So shout out, guys. Thank you for listening.
Brilliant.
I had quite a lot of good feedback just in person from people.
Yeah,
recently.
just generally. It's been good.
Apparently we're good on 2x speed because we just talk quite slow.
Yeah.
Quite.
I've noticed that about myself, actually.
Yesterday I heard from mate Alex, who's like, you know what, you just so calm, like I can just put it on before bed, and it's like, okay, good to sleep to.
Soothing.
Solid.
Very good.
But good to sleep to is good for YouTube numbers, right? Because then somebody can like just put us on, fall asleep,
That's true.
play through the whole thing, bang. I'm like, oh, I need to go back to sleep, put it on again.
Yeah. The ambient background, I hope, would help as well. Just look at that scenic view of the beach, 2 dudes at the fire. That might help you go to sleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be great for engagement. To sit and watch it for 12 hours, 8 hours. How long do people sleep? I don't know.
Maybe we need a long form sleep version, which is like all of the podcasts in one go.
In one go.
That runs for like 10 hours, and you can put that on.
Yeah.
And then you just fall asleep, and we just rack up views on that one.
Yeah. I must admit, that feedback surprises me.
That someone puts it on before they go to bed.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I don't. You know, you're always like really self-critical when you hear your own voice played back to you, or at least I am. I'm like, is that how I actually sound? Like, I wouldn't have thought soothing before bed was the vibe I was giving. But it's definitely slow. Like, I thought that too. I've sped it up.
I think we tend to be a little bit. Yeah, we don't talk fast. It's quite laid back, right?
Yeah.
So
That's the
I
vibe.
think I get the vibe.
Yeah, that's the vibe.
I think it's more that. It's like, it's just not, like some people they're still recording.
Yeah, we are. We're still going.
I think some people you just don't want to listen to. Like, you're like, oh god, this person's just annoying. I
Speed
can't
through it.
I can't listen to them in this mood. Like that's a car listen or a different listen, sort of running listen or something. But not here. But all right. So on that note, like feel free to listen to us while you're asleep, and
Sweet
therefore rack
dreams.
up more of those, views. And if you know anybody that is into this sort of stuff, like tell them about it. 'Cause it is nice to see. And like I like the feedback, so yeah, reach out, tell us what's going on, because it's fun.
Love to hear it.
I mean, it's quite easy for us to just record a chat, so I can see this going on for quite a while. But
Well, let's wrap there.
all right,
It's the good stuff.